Hello everybody. Today I'm going to create for you a video that hopefully will help you with your reasoning in your writing. So the topic of this video is really going to be how to write reasoning in a more sophisticated way. So before I get into the reasoning, I just want to briefly go over the CER paragraph. Okay, CER is a acronym that stands for Claim, Evidence, and Reasoning. And you use this format when you are answering questions. So you can use the CER format if you're answering a question on a test or in another class for an assignment. You always use the CER format for when you are answering a question. And so we know that the C stands for claim, and your claim is simply your answer to the question. So the CER acronym helps you remember that your first sentence should be the answer to the question. The E stands for evidence. Now, evidence is what you see or notice that helps you come up with the answer. Okay, so your evidence is usually going to be a quote from the text, something you saw in the text that helped you come up with your answer. Now, sometimes your evidence might be a description of something that you saw or noticed in a picture or in a video, but for the most part, your evidence is going to be quotes from a text, usually. And then we have the R, which stands for reasoning. And this is the part that's most difficult for most people. So the reasoning is really where you're explaining to your reader how you got from your evidence to your claim. Okay, so you're explaining to them, how did this quote, or whatever it is that you saw or noticed, how did this quote lead you to this answer? Okay, so the reasoning is really a connection between your claim and your evidence. Okay, so I'm going to leave that definition up here and highlight it to really remember, to help us remember that reasoning is really a connection between your claim and your evidence. So I wanted to show you this in a more visual way. So I want you to think of your claim and your evidence as 2 points, okay? So over here on the left side of the screen, this is going to be point A. And over on the right side of the screen, we're going to have point B, okay? And so point A over here is going to be your evidence. You're going to start out at point A with your evidence. So I'm going to label that evidence. Okay, and then over here on the right, you're going to have your claim. And we're going to call this point B, which is going to be your claim. Okay? So on the left here, we have your evidence at point A. Evidence is point A because you always start with your evidence. As an investigator, you collect your evidence before you come up with your answer to the question. And then point B is your answer to the question. You took that evidence and you were able to come up with an answer. So that's why claim is point B. Okay, so we have point A and point B. Now your reasoning is where you explain how you got from point A to point B. You're explaining to your reader, how did you get from this evidence over here, this point A, to your claim over here, point B. So your reasoning is best represented by a line here, connecting point A to point B. So I really want you to think of your reasoning as a trail. Okay? It's a trail that got you from point A to point B. And it's really where you're describing to the reader, you're walking the reader from point A to point B. Okay? So this is just a really visual way to think about claim evidence and reasoning. And I'm going to label this line reasoning down here. Okay. All right. So I'll label this our reasoning, our line here. Okay. So now you're probably wondering, well, how do I use this in my writing? So let's do an example here of how this would work with your writing. Let's start with the missing person activity, because I think the missing person activity is kind of the easiest example to start with. So in the missing person activity, we started by analyzing our evidence of the missing people. And one of those missing people, we noticed they had a pair of gloves, a flashlight, and a fishing book. Okay, notice I didn't list all the evidence, just the key pieces of evidence that I noticed. And after analyzing the evidence, I came up with the claim that this person is adventurous. Okay, so I started with my evidence and I came up with the claim, this person is adventurous. Okay, but now for my reasoning, I need to explain to the reader how I got from these objects over here to this claim over here. How did I get from gloves, flashlight, and fishing book to adventurous? Okay. So the best thing to do with your reasoning is to make statements that you know the reader will agree with. Okay, so you want to make statements that the reader will almost always agree with. So really, your statements that you're going to make for your reasoning are going to mostly consist of facts and generalizations. Okay, so you're making statements that you either know are facts or generalizations that your reader will agree with. We don't want to make statements in our reasoning that the reader will disagree with, because this is really how we prove our point. Okay, so one common mistake that people make is they make a generalization, but their generalization might sound like this. People who are adventurous usually have gloves, a flashlight, and a fishing book. Okay, so here they will have connected these objects to this word adventurous. Okay, by saying people who are adventurous usually have gloves, a flashlight, and a fishing book. This is a common mistake because this is a connection, right? We're connecting these items to the word adventurous. However, this is not a statement that most people would agree with. People who are adventurous usually have gloves, a flashlight, and a fishing book. I don't think that people would necessarily agree with that. Okay, so that statement is really not going to be effective in your reasoning. So we want to start with making statements that we know the reader will agree with. Okay, so I'm going to start by just describing my evidence. The best way to start your reasoning is to just start off by describing your evidence. Okay, so I might say, these items all have to do with being outside, which means this person likes the outdoors. Okay? This is a statement that I am confident my reader will agree with. These items all have to do with being outside, which means this person likes the outdoors. Okay? I know that my reader will agree with that statement. Okay? So I have my keyword here, which is outdoors. Okay, so I'm going to put that in bold. But now what I want to do is connect this word outdoors to this word over here, adventurous. Okay. So the way I'm going to do that is I need to make my next part of my reasoning, my next sentence, connect the word outdoors to the word adventurous. But I also need to make sure I'm making a statement that my reader will agree with. Okay, so I would probably say something like, people who like the outdoors usually like to explore, which would make them adventurous. Okay, so now I'm going to put this in bold so that you can see that I started by describing my evidence and I came up with all the evidence has to do with the outdoors. Okay, then I connected the word outdoors to the word adventurous to really connect for my reader how I got from point A to point B. Okay, so now that's all that's left to do is to take all this information and put it in my CER format. Okay, so I would start off my paragraph with my claim. So I might say, person B is most likely adventurous. For example, they had a pair of gloves, a flashlight, and a fishing book. And then now I'm going to do my reasoning. So I had actually 2 sentences here. It took me 2 sentences to connect these items to the word adventurous. So in this case, my reasoning is going to be 2 sentences. These items all have to do with being outside, which means this person likes the outdoors. People who like the outdoors usually like to explore, which would make them adventurous. Okay, so now I have the word adventurous in my reasoning, and I also have the word adventurous in my claim. So that's a strong connection there. And I was able to get the reader from point A to point B by making 2 statements that I know the reader will agree with. Okay? So that's an easy way to do your reasoning. But now I want to move into an example that might be a little bit more difficult for most people, and that is using a quote. Okay? A quote is a little bit more difficult for most people to connect to their claim. So let's try doing the same exact thing but with a quote. Okay, so right now we're reading The Landlady. And one of the quotes that I noticed that was kind of strange or kind of weird was, the tea tasted faintly of bitter almonds. He didn't much care for it. Okay, so that's my quote from the story that I noticed as being a little strange or a little unusual. Okay, and so this quote here led me to the claim that Billy was poisoned. Because remember, our question was, what happened to Billy? So I noticed over here that the tea tasted faintly of bitter almonds, and that led me to believe that my answer to the question was Billy was poisoned. Okay? So now I have to do my reasoning. I have to explain to the reader how I got from point A to point B. Again, a common mistake is for students to say, or for people in general to say, this shows Billy was poisoned. Okay? This quote in itself does not show that Billy was poisoned. Okay? That's not something that I think my reader would agree with. I have to really explain how I got from here to here. So this reasoning is not going to be sufficient. Okay? So again, the first thing you want to do is explain your evidence in your own words and kind of explain why it's important. So for me, I'm going to say, Billy notices that the tea tastes funny. Okay, so I'm just putting this quote in my own words. Billy notices that the tea tastes funny. Okay, so now what I need to do in my second box here is connect this idea of tasting funny to this word over here, poisoned. Okay, so I'm going to do that by making a generalization. When food is poisoned, it tends to taste funny, which implies that the tea was poisoned. Okay, so now I've connected this idea of tasting funny here to the word poisoned here. So you can see that I took the reader from this quote here to the word poisoned, and I did that by first explaining the quote in my own words and then connecting what I said, tasting funny, to my claim, poisoned. So that I came up with, when food is poisoned, it tends to taste funny, which implies that the tea was poisoned. Okay? All right, so I hope this video was helpful in helping you to write your reasoning. Thanks for listening.